a jewelry shop in Milan's historic center, Via Montenapoleone. Tourists press their faces against bulletproof glass, admiring diamond necklaces and luxury watches worth millions. Inside, a well-dressed man in his 50s examines an emerald bracelet, discussing payment terms with the shop owner in fluent Italian. His tailored suit, expensive leather shoes, and confident manner suggest old money, perhaps a businessman or wealthy collector. He purchases the bracelet for 60,000 euros, paying in cash from a briefcase, and leaves with the velvet box tucked into his coat pocket. The shop owner records the transaction, noting the buyer's name as Marco Bellini, an Italian citizen whose identification appeared completely legitimate. What the shop owner doesn't know is that Marco Bellini doesn't exist. The man who just left is Fawzi Ayash, a Hamas financial operative who has laundered over 80 million euros through Italian luxury goods markets in the past 5 years. The cash he used to purchase that bracelet came from donors in Qatar funneled through shell companies in Turkey. The bracelet will be resold in Dubai next week, converting dirty money into clean assets that will eventually finance weapons purchases and operational cells across Europe. This was money laundering perfected, hiding terrorist financing in plain sight among legitimate commerce in one of the world's luxury capitals. And tonight, Israeli intelligence officers watching from 3 different positions around the shop will follow. Fawzi back to an apartment where 6 other Hamas operatives are coordinating the most sophisticated financial network Mossad has tracked in southern Europe. The shop owner smiled as he completed the sale paperwork. What he processed and what he assumed about his wealthy customer would become evidence in an investigation that exposed how Hamas had weaponized Italy's luxury economy to clean terrorist financing through legitimate businesses that ask no uncomfortable questions about customers paying cash for high-value items. The intelligence operation to dismantle this network began 18 months earlier when Israeli financial analysts detected unusual patterns in luxury goods markets. High-end jewelry, watches, and designer fashion were being purchased in European cities with cash, then immediately resold in Middle Eastern markets at slight losses. The pattern suggested value transfer rather than legitimate commerce, a classic money laundering technique where the goal isn't profit but converting dirty money into clean assets that can enter formal banking systems without raising alerts. This is the story of how intelligence services track money flows through global luxury markets, how jewelry shops become battlegrounds in financial warfare, and how a network can move tens of millions in terrorist financing while appearing to be nothing more than wealthy collectors with expensive tastes. It reveals something darker than simple money laundering, the complicity of legitimate industries that profit from not asking questions, and the reality that every luxury purchase with cash might be funding violence while sales associates smile and process transactions without caring where the money originated or where it's ultimately going. Understanding how Hamas built a money laundering network through Milan's luxury markets requires understanding the organization's financial challenges in the 2010s. Traditional funding sources faced increasing pressure. Gulf state donors became more cautious after international pressure, and anti-money laundering regulations made direct transfers risky. Banking sanctions made moving money through formal financial systems difficult. Cryptocurrency offered some solutions but lacked the infrastructure for moving the massive amounts Hamas operations required. The organization needed methods that could move tens of millions annually while appearing completely legitimate to regulatory oversight. The solution was trade-based money laundering, specifically exploiting luxury goods markets. The concept was elegant in its simplicity. Hamas would receive donations in cash or through informal value transfer systems in the Middle East. That money would be moved to Europe through couriers or existing smuggling networks. In European cities, operatives would purchase high-value luxury items, jewelry, watches, designer handbags using the cash. These purchases appeared legitimate. Rich people buying expensive items wasn't suspicious. The luxury goods would then be shipped to Dubai, where Hamas had established relationships with dealers who would purchase the items for resale. The dealers paid through bank transfers to shell companies that appeared to be legitimate trading firms. The money, now in formal banking systems and appearing to come from luxury goods commerce, could be used for any purpose, including funding terrorism. The genius of the scheme was exploiting characteristics of luxury markets that made them vulnerable. First, luxury retailers accepted large cash transactions with minimal questions. A customer paying €50,000 cash for a watch might raise eyebrows at a car dealership, but in luxury retail, it was common enough not to trigger suspicion. Second, luxury goods held value across markets. A Rolex purchased in Milan could be sold in Dubai for similar price, minimizing the financial loss from the laundering process. Third, luxury markets operated globally with established trade routes and minimal regulatory oversight compared to banking. Shipping jewelry from Italy to UAE was routine commercial activity that attracted no special attention from authorities. Fawzi Ayesh was recruited to manage this operation in 2015. He was 48 years old, born in Gaza but educated in Europe, and held dual Italian-Palestinian citizenship obtained through his Italian mother. His background was perfect for the assignment. He spoke Italian fluently with a native accent, understood Italian culture and business practices, and had no criminal record or obvious terrorist connections that would flag in background checks. He'd worked in legitimate import-export businesses for years, building knowledge of international trade and customs procedures. When Hamas approached him through family connections, he was ready for recruitment. His mission was establishing a systematic operation in Milan that could process millions annually. Milan was chosen deliberately. As one of the world's fashion and luxury capitals, the city had enormous numbers of high-end retailers accustomed to wealthy international customers. The city's position as a commercial hub meant money flowing through was normal and unremarkable, and, critically, Italian financial regulation enforcement was less aggressive than in countries like Switzerland or UK, where authorities scrutinized luxury purchases more carefully. Fawzi arrived in Milan in early 2016 and spent months establishing his Marco Bellini identity. He rented an expensive apartment in a prestigious neighborhood, joining the gym and local social clubs where wealthy Milanese socialized. He purchased a luxury car and dressed in expensive Italian fashion. The investment in lifestyle was significant but necessary. To buy luxury goods without arousing suspicion, he needed to appear as someone who belonged in those stores naturally. Shop owners and sales associates needed to see him as a legitimate wealthy customer, not a suspicious character walking in off the street with bags of cash. Once his cover was established, Fawzi began making purchases. His pattern was carefully designed to avoid triggering anti-money laundering alerts. He never made multiple large purchases at the same store in short periods. He spread transactions across numerous retailers throughout Milan and occasionally in nearby cities like Venice or Florence. He built relationships with sales associates, becoming a known customer who returned periodically, making the transactions feel routine rather than suspicious. He varied the items purchased, sometimes jewelry, sometimes watches, sometimes designer fashion, avoiding patterns that might alert analysts looking for money laundering. The logistics required a team. Fawzi couldn't execute this operation alone. He needed people to receive the cash that arrived from the Middle East through couriers. He needed people to physically transport purchased luxury goods to shipping companies. He needed people to manage the Dubai end of the operation, receiving goods and converting them back to money. By late 2016, he had recruited 6 operatives working in Milan, each handling specific functions while maintaining compartmentation so no single person knew the full operation except Fawzi himself. The Milan cell operated from an apartment in the Asala district, a neighborhood undergoing gentrification where young professionals mixed with immigrant communities, providing perfect camouflage. The apartment served as the operational center where cash was stored before purchases, where luxury goods were cataloged before shipping, and where the team coordinated logistics. To neighbors, the apartment appeared occupied by successful businessmen in the import-export trade, which was technically accurate even if the nature of the trade wasn't what neighbors assumed. The volume of money moving through the operation grew rapidly. In 2016, the first year, approximately €12 million was laundered through luxury purchases. In 2017, that increased to 30 million. By 2018, the operation was processing over €40 million annually. purchasing hundreds of luxury items monthly and shipping them to Dubai in carefully coordinated logistics. The scale was extraordinary and represented one of Hamas's most successful financial operations in Europe. What brought Israeli intelligence attention to the Milan network was pattern recognition rather than any single suspicious transaction. Mossad maintained sophisticated financial intelligence capabilities that tracked money flows linked to terrorist organizations globally. Analysts noticed unusual patterns in luxury goods trade between Italy and UAE. Specific types of items, high-end jewelry and Swiss watches, were being purchased in Milan and immediately resold in Dubai at slight losses. The pattern didn't make sense for legitimate commercial activity. Real luxury goods traders would buy directly from manufacturers or wholesale markets, not retail shops, and they would seek profit margins, not accept losses. Israeli analysts began investigating, identifying specific retailers in Milan where these purchases occurred. They obtained transaction records through liaison relationships with Italian financial intelligence, finding that many purchases were made with cash by customers who appeared only once or made irregular visits rather than being consistent clients. The pattern suggested money laundering, but proving it required identifying the individuals making purchases and connecting them to terrorist financing sources. The breakthrough came through signals intelligence. Israeli technical specialists intercepted communications between Hamas operatives in Turkey and contacts in Italy discussing the Italian operation that was producing excellent results. The communications were encrypted and fragmentary, but they provided crucial intelligence that Hamas was running a significant financial operation in Italy. Cross-referencing this intelligence with the luxury goods purchase patterns led Israeli analysts to focus on Milan as the likely center of operations. Mossad deployed a surveillance team to Milan in early 2018 tasked with identifying Hamas operatives and mapping the network. The team consisted of 8 officers operating under various covers, some posing as tourists, others as business travelers. One as a student studying fashion design in Milan. They began systematic surveillance of luxury retailers where suspicious purchases had been identified, photographing customers and tracking their movements after transactions. Fawzi was identified within 6 weeks. Surveillance photographed him making a €60,000 cash purchase at a watch boutique, then followed him through Milan's streets using mobile surveillance techniques designed to avoid detection. He led them to the Isala apartment where they observed other individuals entering and leaving over subsequent days. License plate tracking identified vehicles associated with the apartment. Communications surveillance identified phone numbers used by people connected to the location. Gradually, the surveillance built a complete picture of the cell's composition and activities. Israeli intelligence faced a decision about how to proceed. One option was continuing surveillance indefinitely, monitoring the operation to understand its full scope and potentially following the money to identify other Hamas financial networks. But extended surveillance carried risks. If the team was detected, the operation would be compromised and Hamas would know Israeli intelligence was tracking their financial activities in Europe. Another option was sharing intelligence with Italian authorities and allowing them to investigate and potentially prosecute. This would disrupt the operation but required trusting that Italian action would be effective and wouldn't leak information that would alert Hamas to how they'd been compromised. The decision was made to brief Italian authorities but maintain Israeli operational control through embedded coordination. In April 2018, Mossad shared intelligence with Italy's Direzione Investigativa Antimafia, the anti-mafia investigation directorate that also handled terrorist financing cases. The briefing included surveillance evidence, financial transaction analysis, and signals intelligence showing the network's connection to Hamas. Italian investigators were initially skeptical, questioning how Israeli intelligence had obtained such detailed information about activities on Italian soil. The political sensitivity of Israeli operations in Italy created tensions, but the evidence was compelling enough that Italian authorities agreed to open formal investigation. The Italian investigation, coordinated with ongoing Israeli surveillance, spent 4 months building a comprehensive case. Investigators obtained wiretap authorizations allowing them to monitor communications of all 6 operatives plus Fawzi. They conducted financial analysis tracing the origin of cash used for purchases and the destination of luxury goods after purchase. They coordinated with authorities in Dubai to identify the dealers receiving and reselling the goods. Discovering these dealers had connections to Hamas financial networks. The evidence accumulated demonstrated not just money laundering but specifically terrorist financing, a more serious offense under Italian and international law. Folzi made a mistake in July 2018 that provided investigators with crucial evidence. He met with a Hamas handler who traveled from Turkey to Milan for in-person coordination. The meeting occurred at a cafe in Piazza del Duomo, Milan's central square, surrounded by tourists and apparently safe from surveillance. What Folzi didn't know was that Italian investigators, alerted by Israeli intelligence that the handler was traveling to Milan, had positioned undercover officers throughout the square with parabolic microphones that could capture conversations from a distance. The recording captured Folzi and the handler discussing specifics of the operation, including references to weapons purchases that would be financed with laundered money. This conversation provided direct evidence linking the money laundering to terrorism. The decision to arrest the network came in September 2018. Italian authorities coordinated with Israeli intelligence to ensure the operation would capture all members simultaneously and seize evidence before anyone could destroy records or flee. On September 14th, Italian police conducted dawn raids at 7 locations across Milan, arresting Folzi and all 6 operatives. Searches seized cash, luxury goods awaiting shipment, communications devices, and extensive financial records documenting the operation's scope. The arrests revealed the operation's sophistication. In Folzi's apartment, investigators found detailed ledgers recording every purchase, including item description, purchase price, resale price, and profit or loss. The records showed that over 3 years, the network had laundered €87 million through luxury goods purchased. The financial loss from immediate resale was approximately 8%, meaning Hamas accepted $7 million in losses to clean $80 million. That 8% was effectively the cost of doing business, the fee for converting dirty cash into clean bank transfers. Interrogations of the operatives provided additional intelligence about Hamas financial operations. Several operatives agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences, revealing that the Milan network was one of several similar operations Hamas ran in European cities. Networks in Paris, Brussels, and Geneva operated using identical methods, purchasing luxury goods with cash and reselling them in Dubai or other Middle Eastern markets. The combined volume of these networks represented hundreds of millions in terrorist financing moving through legitimate European commerce annually. The Dubai end of the operation was more difficult to disrupt. UAE authorities, while officially cooperating in counter-terrorism efforts, were less aggressive in pursuing Hamas financial activities given the organization's political influence in the region. The dealers who received and resold luxury goods from Milan claimed they were legitimate businessmen unaware that items they purchased were proceeds of terrorist financing. Without evidence that dealers knowingly participated in money laundering, UAE authorities declined to prosecute, allowing that end of the network to continue operating even after Milan's cell was dismantled. The legal proceedings in Italy demonstrated both the strength of the case and the complexities of prosecuting terrorist financing. Folzi and the 6 operatives were charged with multiple offenses including money laundering, terrorist financing, and participation in terrorist organization. The defense argued that purchasing luxury goods wasn't inherently criminal, that prosecutors hadn't proven the money used came from terrorism, and that even if Hamas ultimately benefited, the defendants were simply moving money and weren't responsible for how it was eventually used. The prosecution countered with the recording of Folzi's conversation with the Hamas handler discussing weapons purchases, demonstrating direct knowledge of the terrorist purpose. They presented financial analysis tracing the money's origin to Hamas-controlled accounts and donors known to support the organization. They showed that the systematic nature of the operation, purchasing luxury goods only to immediately resell at a loss, proved the purpose was money laundering rather than legitimate commerce. The evidence was overwhelming. The trial concluded in June 2019 with convictions on all major charges. Folzi received a 15-year sentence for leading the operation. The 6 operatives received sentences ranging from 8 to 12 years, depending on their roles and cooperation with investigators. Additionally, Italian authorities froze assets totaling over €4 million that were traceable to the network's activities. The luxury goods seized were auctioned with proceeds going to Italy's Crime Victims Fund, a symbolic gesture that money intended for terrorism would instead help those harmed by crime. The Milan case had significant ripple effects through European counterterrorism and financial regulation. Italian authorities shared intelligence with partners across Europe, leading to investigations of similar Hamas networks in other countries. Several luxury retailers faced regulatory scrutiny for accepting large cash transactions without adequate anti-money laundering procedures. Industry associations representing luxury brands issued new guidelines encouraging members to implement enhanced due diligence for cash purchases over certain thresholds. The luxury goods industry response was mixed. Some brands took the threat seriously, implementing new procedures requiring customer identification and source of funds documentation for cash purchases over €10,000. Others resisted additional regulation, arguing it would drive customers to competitors and that retailers shouldn't be expected to act as law enforcement agents investigating their customers. The debate revealed tension between commercial interests and security concerns that remains unresolved. For Hamas, the Milan operation's dismantling was a significant financial blow but not catastrophic. The organization adapted by shifting to other methods, increasing use of cryptocurrency, expanding informal value transfer systems, and developing new trade-based money laundering schemes using different products and routes. The fundamental challenge of moving money remained, but Hamas demonstrated adaptability in finding new solutions when old methods were compromised. For Israeli intelligence, the Milan operation was considered successful collaboration with European partners. Mossad provided crucial intelligence that Italian authorities lacked, while Italian investigators brought legal authorities and local knowledge that enabled prosecution. The case demonstrated that international cooperation, despite political tensions and sovereignty concerns, could achieve results neither country could accomplish alone. The broader implications extended beyond one disrupted network. The Milan case revealed how terrorists exploit legitimate commerce for financial operations. Luxury markets, art markets, real estate, any industry dealing in high-value items and accepting cash was vulnerable to exploitation by money launderers. Defending against this threat required cooperation between law enforcement, financial regulators, and private industries, coordination that remained inconsistent and incomplete. The jewelry shop on Via Montenopolione, where Fauzi made his last purchase before arrest, still operates, selling luxury items to wealthy customers. New owners took over after the previous owner faced regulatory sanctions for inadequate anti-money laundering compliance. The shop now requires identification for all cash purchases over €5,000 and maintains detailed customer records accessible to authorities. These changes reflect industry-wide adjustments prompted by the Milan case and ongoing concerns about terrorist financing through luxury markets. The apartment in Isala where the Hamas cell operated was seized by Italian authorities and eventually auctioned. New residents have no idea their home once served as a coordination center for one of the largest terrorist financing operations prosecuted in Italy. Nothing physical remains to indicate what occurred there except in evidence files stored in Italian police archives documenting every transaction, every meeting, every communication that built the case against Fauzi's network. What the Milan investigation revealed about modern terrorist financing is that organizations like Hamas have become sophisticated in exploiting legal commerce for illegal purposes. The days of simple bank transfers or cash couriers are supplemented by complex schemes that blend seamlessly with legitimate business. Trade-based money laundering, real estate transactions, investment fraud, cryptocurrency, all these methods allow terrorist organizations to move money while appearing to be engaged in normal commercial activity. Detecting and disrupting these schemes requires financial, intelligence capabilities and investigative resources that many countries struggle to maintain consistently. For the luxury retailers whose businesses were used for money laundering, most claimed ignorance of criminal activity and portrayed themselves as victims exploited by sophisticated criminals. The legal reality supported this position to the extent that retailers weren't prosecuted as conspirators unless evidence showed knowing participation. But moral questions remained about industries that profited from not asking uncomfortable questions about customers paying tens of thousands in cash while regulatory frameworks gave them plausible deniability for failing to detect money laundering occurring openly in their shops. The story of Fawzi Ayaj and the Milan Hamas cell ends with quiet imprisonment in an Italian facility where he serves his 15-year sentence. According to corrections officials, he maintains connections with Hamas supporters who provide financial support to his family and ensure he's not forgotten by the organization. His case file remains active as Italian investigators continue pursuing leads developed from evidence seized during his arrest, attempting to map the full scope of Hamas financial networks in Europe. The investigation continues because terrorist financing doesn't end with one prosecution. Hamas and other organizations constantly develop new methods for moving money. Law enforcement achieves temporary victories by dismantling specific networks, but the underlying challenge persists. As long as organizations need to finance operations and as long as global commerce provides opportunities for exploitation, the cycle of financial network construction, detection, and disruption will continue. What remains clear from the Milan operation is that countering terrorist financing requires seeing the battlefield clearly. It's not fought primarily in caves or training camps, but in jewelry shops, real estate offices, currency exchanges, and luxury boutiques of European cities. The weapons aren't bombs or guns, but financial instruments, shell companies, and sophisticated schemes that transform dirty money into clean assets. Victory requires financial intelligence capabilities that can track money across borders and through legitimate commerce, legal frameworks that criminalize not just terrorism but the financial network supporting it, and international cooperation that allows intelligence services to work together despite political differences. The luxury bracelet that Fawzi purchased on his final day of freedom before arrest was eventually recovered from a shipping facility before it reached Dubai. Italian authorities auctioned it along with hundreds of other items seized from the network. A wealthy Italian collector purchased the emerald bracelet for €45,000, 15,000 less than Fawzi had paid. Unaware of its history or that his purchase was providing poetic justice as money intended for terrorism instead funded Italy's crime victims compensation program, the bracelet now sits in a private collection, beautiful and innocent, carrying no visible trace of the criminal network that briefly possessed it or the intelligence operation that exposed how European luxury could be transformed into weapons of war.